This was Earth, 66 million years ago, right after the dinosaurs died. You already know that part. The asteroid, the extinction. But here's what nobody tells you. What happened next was even stranger. For the first time in years, the world went silent. A darkness that would last for years. But deep underground, something was waiting. The monsters that rose from the ashes. The creatures that took over a broken world. And trust me, they were just as terrifying as anything that came before. This is the untold story, the one that starts where the dinosaur story ends. The morning sun rose over a world that had no idea it was about to end. A mother triceratops nudged her calf toward the river. "Drink up, little one." T-Rex dozed in the shade, belly full from last night's hunt, dreaming whatever dreams a king dreams. Somewhere in the ferns, an Edmontosaurus called out to its herd, "Just another day." The same kind of day this world had seen for over 100 million years. Then the sky caught fire. A light appeared above the clouds, small at first, then growing faster. The Triceratops raised her head. The birds went silent, and then it hit. The ground shook so hard that the trees snapped in half. A roar louder than thunder tore across the land. The horizon turned white, then orange, then a wall of fire racing toward them faster than any creature could run. Edmontosaurus herds scattered, screaming, trampling each other. The flames took everything, all of it, gone in minutes. And then came the dust. It rose from the place where the asteroid had hit. Billions of tons of rock and ash climbing into the sky, spreading across the whole planet like a dark blanket. The sun disappeared. Day became night, and night didn't end. For months, the world stayed dark. Then the cold came. Snow fell on jungles that had never felt winter. The plants died first, then the hunters who fed on them. The giants wandered through this dying world, hungry, lost, looking for food that didn't exist anymore. The T-Rex, the king of the earth, stumbled through the ash, ribs showing, eyes hollow. It lay down in a frozen riverbed. It never got up. One by one, they all fell. Every king and queen of the old world, gone, just like that. 3 out of every 4 living things on earth, erased. When the dust finally began to settle, there was nothing left. Just bones, ash, silence. But not everything had died. Deep underground in burrows too small for the giants to notice, tiny hearts were still beating. They had no idea what waited for them above. For months, nothing moved. The little creature lived in darkness now, furry, trembling, living on worms and roots and whatever they could dig from the frozen dirt. The world above was death. Ash fell like snow. There was nothing alive, just gray ground and gray sky and the smell of rot everywhere, so it stayed below, waiting. Then one morning, something changed. Light, not much, just a faint glow creeping through the cracks in the earth. The creature froze. It had almost forgotten what that looked like. Slowly, carefully, it crept toward the surface. The sky was still gray. Ash still covered everything, but for the first time in what felt like forever, there was the sun. Weak, pale, barely breaking through the dust. But there, the creature sat at the edge of its burrow, blinking. The cold wind ruffled its fur. It sniffed the air. Still silence, but something else too. Something green, a fern, tiny, barely pushing through the ash, but alive. The creature didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of everything. The ferns were the first to return. Their spores had survived underground just like the little mammals. And now, with the tiniest bit of sunlight, they were waking up. Over the next weeks, more appeared. Then more, patches of green spreading across the gray wasteland like slow-moving hope. And with the plants came food. Insects crawled out of hiding, worms surfaced, seeds began to sprout. The little creature grew bolder. It wandered farther from its burrow each day, and it wasn't alone. Others like it were emerging too. Dozens of them, then hundreds, blinking in the pale light, sniffing the strange new air, learning to live in a world without giants. For the first time, the world was quiet. The mammals didn't know that one day their descendants would grow as big as the dinosaurs. They didn't know about the monsters still to come. All they knew was this: they had survived, and the sun was back. 100,000 years passed. The world looked nothing like before. The gray was gone. Forests of ferns and palms stretched across the land. Rivers ran clear again. The sky was blue, and everywhere life was returning. But it wasn't the same life. The little creatures that once hid in burrows were changing, growing. Their children were bigger than they had been, and their children's children bigger still. 100,000 years ago, the biggest mammal was the size of a rat. Now, some were the size of raccoons. A few were even bigger, the size of small dogs. They wandered through the palm forests, searching for food. And food was everywhere, more than enough for everyone. With nothing strong enough to challenge them, just an empty world waiting to be filled. And they filled it. Some stayed on the ground, digging for roots and worms. Others climbed into the trees, learning to leap from branch to branch. They spread into every corner of the land. Forests, riverbanks, hillsides, plains. Wherever there was food, they followed. 300,000 years after the asteroid, the biggest mammals had grown to the size of beavers. They waddled through the underbrush, fat and slow, with nothing to fear. The world was warm. Life was easy. Too easy, maybe, because something else was happening. Something the mammals didn't notice, not yet. The palm forests were changing. New plants were appearing. Legumes, beans, protein-rich food that made the animals grow even faster. And with all that food, the mammals were getting bigger, much bigger. 700,000 years after the extinction, a creature called Ectoconus walked through the forests of what is now Colorado. It was the size of a sheep, over 100 pounds, 100 times bigger than the tiny survivors that had crawled out of the burrows. It had flat teeth for grinding plants and strong legs for traveling long distances. There was nothing to run from, or so it thought, because far to the south, in the swamps and rivers of what is now Colombia, something else was growing too. Something that wasn't a mammal, something that had also survived the darkness. The mammals walked through their forests, ate their fill, raised their young. They thought the age of monsters was over. They were wrong. The age of monsters was just beginning, and the first of them was already out there, waiting in the water, growing longer with every passing year, waiting to become the biggest predator the world had ever seen. The swamps of South America were quiet, too quiet. Steam rose from the dark water, thick trees crowded the shoreline, their roots disappearing into mud that hadn't dried in centuries. The air was heavy, hot, almost too thick to breathe. Nothing moved. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. Then a ripple, slow, almost invisible. Something was gliding just beneath the surface. A crocodile, 8 feet long, covered in armored scales, floated near the riverbank. It had ruled these waters for years, killed anything that came too close, feared nothing. It never saw what came next. The water exploded. A shape burst from below, a head wider than the crocodile's entire body, jaws lined with teeth curved like hooks. Before the crocodile could even snap its mouth open, the creature had wrapped around it. Coils thicker than tree trunks squeezed tighter and tighter. Bones cracked. The crocodile thrashed once, twice, then went still. Titanoboa, 48 feet long, heavier than a car. The thickest part of its body stood 3 feet high, taller than a man's waist. If it had tried to enter your house, it would have had to squeeze through the doorway. This was the new king. While the mammals were growing bigger on land, something else had been growing in the water. Titanoboa had survived the same extinction, crawled out of the same darkness. But where the mammals stayed small and cautious, this snake had gone the other direction. Bigger, longer, deadlier. The warm, humid world was perfect for it. Snakes are cold-blooded. They need heat to grow. And this world was hotter than anything we know today. The swamps stayed warm year-round. Food was everywhere. Giant turtles with shells 5 feet wide. Crocodiles that thought they were apex predators. Fish longer than a man is tall. Titanoboa ate them all. It was a nightmare, silent, patient, invisible beneath the surface until the moment it struck. By the time prey saw those jaws opening, it was already over. But here's the thing. Titanoboa wasn't alone. Other monsters were waking up, on other continents, in other forests. Creatures just as terrifying were rising to power. Birds that stood taller than men. Predators with beaks that could crush bone. Hunters that made the mammals look like what they really were, prey. The age of the dinosaurs was over, but the age of nightmares, it was just getting started. On the other side of the world, something else was rising. Europe was an island back then, a warm green paradise surrounded by shallow seas. Palm trees swayed in the humid breeze. Mammals had spread across this land like they owned it, but they didn't. Something else lived in these forests that watched from the shadows, something that had been waiting a very long time. It stood 7 feet tall. Feathers covered its massive body, dark, sleek, built for a creature that had long forgotten how to fly. Its legs were thick as tree trunks, powerful enough to run down anything on 2 legs or 4. But it was the head that stopped you cold. Enormous, almost the size of a horse's skull. And that beak, curved, heavy, strong enough to crack bones like twigs. Gastornis. When it walked, the ground trembled, not like the dinosaurs. That thunder was gone forever, but enough to make the mammals remember that size still mattered in this world. Gastornis was patient. It would stand motionless for hours, watching, waiting, those cold eyes scanning the undergrowth for movement. And when some unlucky creature finally made a mistake, wandered too far from cover, stopped to eat for just a moment too long, the bird would move. Faster than something that big should ever move, that massive beak swinging down like a hammer. One strike, that's all it took. The mammals tried to adapt. They learned to stay near the thick brush where the giant bird couldn't follow, but there was nowhere truly safe. Gastornis ruled Europe for millions of years, and it wasn't the only one. Across the ocean in South America, even more terrifying birds were rising. The terror birds, true predators with hooked beaks designed for tearing flesh. Some of them grew over 10 feet tall. They ran faster than horses and dominated their continent for longer than humans have existed. The mammals were surrounded. The warm green world that had seemed so safe, so full of promise, had become a hunting ground. Danger everywhere, and yet the mammals survived. They kept pushing into new territories, finding new food sources, evolving new ways to escape and fight back, because that's what survivors do. But nothing lasts forever. The world that had given birth to these giants was changing again. Slowly at first, so slowly that no creature alive could notice. But it was happening. The heat was fading. For millions of years, the planet had stayed warm. The perfect world for cold-blooded killers like Titanoboa. But deep beneath the surface, the earth was shifting. Volcanoes quieted. Ocean currents changed direction. And degree by degree, year by year, the temperature dropped. Titanoboa felt it first. The great snake that had ruled the swamps for millions of years began to slow down. The king of the water was gone. In Europe, Gastornis faced a different enemy. The forests were changing. The thick, humid jungles that had hidden the giant bird for so long were thinning out. New plants appeared, grasslands spread where trees once stood, and with the open ground came new dangers. Predators that could see Gastornis from far away, mammals with sharp teeth and fast legs, hunters that worked in packs. One by one, the last of Gastornis disappeared from the forests of Europe. The terror birds held on longer. For a while, it seemed like nothing could stop them. Then the continents connected. A bridge of land rose from the ocean, linking South America to the north, and across that bridge came something the terror birds had never faced: competition. The terror birds fought back, but this was a war they couldn't win. The last of them fell somewhere in the grasslands, bones scattered by scavengers, forgotten by a world that had already moved on. Every monster that rose after the dinosaurs, every giant snake, killer bird, and every creature that had made the mammals tremble, all of them eventually fell. But the mammals? They were still standing. Every giant that rose to challenge them eventually crumbled. And every time one fell, the mammals grew stronger, bigger, bolder. Their time was finally coming. Millions of years passed, then tens of millions. The mammals kept becoming something new. Some grew enormous. Elephants with tusks longer than cars, rhinos covered in thick fur, sloths the size of houses that walked on their knuckles, cats with fangs like curved swords, wolves that hunted in packs across frozen plains. The world belonged to them now. Every continent and climate, wherever there was land, mammals walked. And then something strange happened. In Africa, a small group of mammals started doing things differently. They stood on two legs. They picked up sticks and stones. They looked at the world with curious eyes and began to ask questions. Why does the sun rise? What are those lights in the sky? What happens if I rub these rocks together? Fire. They discovered fire. Everything changed after that. They built shelters, then villages. They crossed oceans, mapped the stars, dug into the earth, and found the bones of creatures that had lived millions of years before them. They told their stories, tried to understand the world that existed before they did. And sometimes, late at night, they looked up at the sky and wondered, what if another asteroid came? What if it all ended again? They didn't know the answer. Nobody does. But here's what they did know. Here's what we know. 66 million years ago, the world ended. The tiny creature became everything. Whales swimming through the deepest oceans, lions ruling the savannah, elephants, dolphins, bears, wolves, us. We are the children of that darkness, the descendants of the survivors. Every person who has ever lived, every dream that has ever been dreamed, all of it traces back to that tiny heartbeat underground. The worst day in Earth's history gave us everything. The dinosaurs had their time, but their ending was our beginning. And that's what really happened after the dinosaurs died.